part of my role is that I'm just having conversations all the time with employees. I've got one of those, A, it's the job, but B, I think I've got one of those faces where people just tell me stuff. And this is another employee from one of our US offices who has ADHD. And phoned up to talk me through the fact that they were going through a performance improvement program at the moment. And what was really interesting was that the reason that they were going through the performance improvement program is because they weren't able to use the specific tool that they needed for some sort of process they were doing. So engineering speak, I have to admit, I am not an engineer, so this will probably not be as detailed as it should be. But what they'd said was that, look, if I was able to use a visualization program rather than using Excel in order to show flowchart, etc., that works better for me. That's me at my best if I'm able to use this particular program. But the engineering team lead had said, well, but that's not the process that we follow. You actually have to, so very much in a black and white linear way, they had to follow this process. And again, it was just this nugget of, my goodness, if we could make that small adjustment for this individual, give them the software that they needed, then actually life would be a lot easier for them. But what came to the fore was, quite often, every time that you get a new line manager, you're in a new team, it's like coming out every single time to have to explain, do you know what? I need the software for X, Y, and Z. And that burden on the individual to always have to identify themselves as a bit different, I think is quite difficult. So it's making us pause for thought around, how do you access software requests? You know, can you make it a little bit easier for people? What might the checklist look like, you know, when you're moving roles? So there's lots of things that are kind of being thought about right now to make life easier for people at work.
I'm actually sorry to interrupt, but when you met that last point you made there, Lisa, something that Sellafield launched that I have been working on since I started in this role, and I was one of the, I keep referring to myself as a guinea pig or test subject, which is just my sense of humour coming through, but I was part of the pilot before I got this role and it became my job, is reasonable adjustments passports is how we've decided to term them. And Sellafield's, I mean, obviously reasonable adjustments, Equality Act, any disabled employee who is finding barriers in the workplace has a right to ask for adjustments of their employer, and as long as they are reasonable, the employer has a duty of care to make them. Sellafield's took that a little bit further and have made ours available to all the workforce with a disability condition or circumstance that might need an adjustment. And it kind of captures what you were saying there, because it is exhausting having to, like, proverbially come out and explain yourself and explain your disability or your condition every time to multiple line managers. So what our passport's been designed to do, and the reason we call it a passport, is once the person gets it, agrees to it, gets it all written and signed up by their first line manager, your line manager changes, you can literally hand them a piece of paper and say, go read this and then we'll have a conversation after. So you don't have to constantly be kind of bearing your soul. And for some people, especially with hidden disabilities, to be justified, you have to explain to so many people your worst days or your worst case. And that can be so exhausting, because people are like, oh, but you look fine. I'm like, it's called a hidden disability for a reason, and 80% of disabilities are hidden. You know, that's a huge chunk. So these passports allow you to have that all written down. It kind of takes some of the burden off you from a line manager perspective, to have to constantly kind of ask for that. And it's kind of a catch-all document. It's so flexible, and you can list things if you need a particular type of software or a particular type of PPE. Like, I struggle with visual sensory issues, so these glasses aren't actually for vision. They have an invisible meshing to adjust the light spectrum, so I don't struggle with that. And I got them when I started working in the open plan office. Prior to that, when I worked on our plants in the industrial setting, I would always have a set of tinted safety glasses that kind of did that job for me under fluorescent lights. So that was always part of my passport.
Do you ever get any resistance, Terry, to people wanting that down in black and white? Is there you know, sometimes there's a sort of labelling kind of issue that people might struggle with as well?
A little bit. I've had, because like I say, this was launched during the pandemic last year. It was actually launched before it was finalised. We wanted to do it to be an electronic document so we could get data and track trending on them. But we had such a backlog to get that developed. We were like, we're going to put it out as a Word document. People can store it themselves. So I don't have data on this. I don't know how many are out there. But I've had people kind of get in touch either through direct to me or through our employee networks and ask those questions. And some people have said, well, I've got a good line manager. They already make adjustments. Do I need a passport filled out? You don't. But I always kind of, try to be the voice of reason of, well, what if your line manager changes? If you get it wrote down while it's all in place, you've got that grounding work. Some people don't want to put a lot of detail down. They don't want to write down their worst case days. They just want to put down like the broad title of their disability or condition and kind of leave it at that. And that's also fine. Like, you don't have to bare your soul or expose anything you don't want to.